This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow. This episode is brought to you by Rule 1 Proteins. If you're looking to get some supplements, some vitamins, whatever you need, they got it. Go check them out at www.rule1proteins.com. You guys know the drill. My name is Truck. I'm joined as always by Culls and Shane O'Mac. And today we have a special guest, Lucas Perfetti, the Bears extraordinaire. Lucas, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Just suffering through more Bears football. I feel like we're in that like 5 stages of grief mode where I'm in acceptance, where I'm like, yeah, the Bears are bad, and sooner than later, draft will come, free agency. I'll convince myself that they're going to be better than they'll be. Let's get it rolling.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be a Bears fan. Usually around this time, there's not too much to be excited about. We've had some pretty high picks in the last couple of years, drafting Fields and stuff. But I feel like right now is the most exciting time to be a Bears fan. Bears are all the talk in the sports media world. So, but Culls, Shane, how you guys doing, man?
Yeah, I'll give some background. Luke, what's going on, brother? Luke and I go way back. I mean, probably to like high school, I would say. But even before then, we probably knew of each other since, 6th through 8th grade, something like that.
I'd say freshman year, yeah.
Yeah, freshman year is kind of when we really started hanging out with mutual friends. But it's been, not to age us and sound old, but over 10, 15 years since we've last connected. But as we started the podcast, Luke's very active on Bears Twitter, has podcast Barely There, I don't know what your plans are there, but we can just kind of get into Bears talk. I think, as Ryan just said, a lot of the conversation is going to be Chicago Bears. What are they doing with the draft pick? There's already whispers of Hard Knocks, so it's a very exciting time to be a Bears fan. And I know, Luke, you've mentioned that I've seen on Twitter that you've muted a lot of Bears talk and Caleb, Justin conversation, but wanted to bring you on to kind of go into a deep dive here today.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets so repetitive, and like I already felt like I got beat up by it before like we even made it to the Super Bowl, right? So I was like, all right, we still have until April. I do think if there's a Fields trade, it'll be coming in between the opening of free agency and after the combine. So we might see some instant relief, but polls said it was going up until draft day, opposed to last year where they seemed a lot more open to trading the pick. So I had to just take a little break from it because it's like every single day, and it's always the faceless Twitter accounts that are like 11 to 14-year-olds that just freak out on people and have nothing else to do. And it's like, dude, I got a job and stuff. Like I can't see this in my feed all day long. So had to mute a couple of words there, but I'm actually ready to re-engage because I just feel like I have a different perspective now that the season's over and, really had some more time to think on it and cook on it.
Yeah, so I think what would be best, let's just kind of, I don't think we're going to have any kind of agenda here, but I want to get a little bit of, your background, a couple different podcasts if you've done, where you're headed, and just talk a little bit about your, fantasy football experience, what your preferred game style is, and kind of just get a little bit of background from you. And then we'll have Truck set the stage on where the Bears' current landscape is and what are going to be the main storylines that we're going to be talking about here over the next few months. And then just kind of dive into what our stance is, and it'll be conversational and go from there.
Yeah, cool. No, it sounds awesome. I'm really excited to be doing this episode with you guys. When it comes to podcasting and that good stuff, I actually started a website maybe it's already 2024. It was probably like 7 or 8 years ago at this point, called bearscoverage.com. And then I had a group contact me, which I won't give them any there wasn't the greatest exit on that, so I'm not going to give them any recognition. But they approached me, and I started exclusively writing blogs and stuff like that for them. Was leader of their Bears team. We did a podcast, and then me and another guy, my buddy Duke, we broke off. Did our Barely There podcast. I kind of am starting to get the itch to start writing again, just because I feel like it's, if you write I feel like I'm the type of person that gives every Bears podcast writer, stuff like that, a chance. If you're a blogger, the lowest level, if I see something on Twitter like that doesn't look like it's going to give my phone a virus, I'll click on it and give, if you're going to give me a well thought out article, like I'll give you a follow and check things out. And I just feel like I was someone that was really way more of the analytical film study mind versus like the, hey, this is some clickbait, right? And you put a lot of energy in those types of articles. So, with growing up and having to make more money, those kind of things, like I was out of college and I lived in LA, just kind of like working as a bartender. So I had nothing but time at that moment in time. Now it's, I'm a little bit more packed schedule wise, but I might break into that again. I've been in misery for 33 years. I will date myself. As a Bears fan, like I've been watching this, I've been studying it. I've seen the different regimes come and go. And it's starting to wear on me, brother. Like I'm seeing this, I'm starting to see the arc of some of these older Bears fans where they're just like, I can't deal with the McCaskies. Like before I was always like, no, Ted Phillips isn't that big of a deal. Right. When I was younger, like, no, it's the GM's fault. And it's like, no, it's an organizational issue. And like, it's starting to, like, I'm starting to have little to no faith, especially because we're in that stages of grief where you're like acceptance right now. But there was a time where I was like, man, Kevin Warren might be our white light. Like he might be the one to break the cycle. We have this chance. And then you kind of realize like, he's Ted Phillips part 2 with this whole Arlington Heights thing and that direction of things. So, that's kind of my history in terms of podcasting and Bear stuff. When it comes to fantasy, I'm a standard guy, man. I like standard redraft. I did start dabbling with, I orphan in league and dynasty. And I did a startup league in dynasty as well last year. I'm really looking to, and if you guys have your ear to the ground, I really have been trying to get into an IDP league for like 5 years, and it seems like no one has any interest in that at all. I'm a big defensive guy. I being a Bears fan, I've only seen good defense. I don't really watch a lot of good offense. So I would like to get into one of those, but yeah, man, I'm a standard 6-point passing touchdown guy. Like I do like some of the other things. I joined a guillotine league last year that was probably my favorite.
Awesome.
Different format, right? Because it's like a confidence pool and you just kind of have to be not the worst every single week and get that fab in free agency. I really enjoyed that format a lot. When it comes to the super flex stuff, it's cool because it's like, I do like sleeper and hey, we have a tight end premium or a running back premium league. And it does change the way the draft is going to go. So that's cool. But when it comes to like, I still feel like the most competitive leagues I'm in, I have 2 home leagues where it's like, older guys aren't really plugged into the fantasy world, right? Like they're not overthinking it. They're just like, yeah, Deebo Samuel's a good football player, so I'm going to take him in the 4th round, opposed to being like, well, this value and that value. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you stump yourself out. So it's like my home standard leagues that seem to be the most competitive, where you're like, damn, dude, like who is this guy and why is this team like this? Versus, the people that are writing like 30 paragraph essays about why this guy's going to fall off, like Mike Evans, right? Like Mike Evans has always been that borderline guy where someone's always pushing him out of that top 5, top 10 conversation at wide receiver. And he seems to always catch 10 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. And you're just like, why the fuck is this guy here in the 7th round? Right. Whereas in my home leagues, I don't think there's that much overthinking. So I am a standard guy. I like the running backs having the power. I'm typically I'll draft 4 running backs in the first 3 lines, 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds, even though there's only 3 slots to start a running back, because I just feel like you get that 3-headed monster in a standard league and you're booming, right? You're ready to go. So does that cover everything you asked me?
Yeah, for sure. So on the IDP thing, this is definitely not an IDP podcast.
I know.
No one is. It's very niche. And I can't get, I have so many moving parts as it is that for me to, when I get into my stance in these games is I look for every competitive advantage to try to shrink that, that random, getting whatever, Dalvin Cook go off for 60 in a playoff. Like some of those things you can't control, but I try to control everything that I can and take advantage of all of the, little competitive advantages you can take. So I can't learn another style and find all of those little nuances that you can control. I can't do it. I don't have the time for that right now. But I have one question. So you said you're a standard league guy. Truck has a saying here on the podcast that PPR is standard. When you say standard, is that is non-PPR, correct?
If I were to pick, I would pick a half point PPR. If that would be my ideal league. I
agree.
And no reason should see. This is my thought. And Truck, no offense to you, because I know I'm against the grain on this. I know you are with the norm, and I am the old head that is kind of an idiot for this take. But if Deontay Johnson has 7 receptions for 35 yards and for some reason has more points than, say, someone with 20 yards and a touchdown, like that doesn't sit well with me, right? Like you had 35 yards. Like did you contribute? It is fantasy football, but like who contributed more to their team winning? The guy that scored the touchdown or the guy that had 7 receptions and 4 of them were screens and they didn't do shit? So that's just my thought process. Half point, I think, is that perfect middle ground. But most of my leagues I'm in are full PPR, other than my home league.
Yeah, I can respect that. I understand what you're saying, factoring in the real world football and who makes an impact. That makes a lot of sense. But for me, it's just, we play fantasy football to have fun. And what's more fun than scoring points, So the more points, the better. That's my ideology on it. And I think receptions are an important part of football. So I like valuing that. So that I just stick with that because I don't like doing half point PPR. I don't like doing standard. I hardly ever even acknowledge standard leagues without any half point or full point. But I'm a little, very much on that side of the fence with PPR. That's all.
So I think I agree that half point PPR is my preferred option. It doesn't get too carried away. I mean, now you're seeing the game is such a pass heavy game now that you're seeing guys get 10 plus catches every week, which could just absolutely bury a team, right? Like CeeDee Lamb had a couple of games where he had 14 catches north of 150 yards and a touchdown or two. And like, that's so hard to come back from playing against that. But yeah, I think the super flex point you made, I saw a lot of leagues kind of trending in that direction. I feel like it became a lot more common over this past year. And then this year, half of the league's quarterbacks get injured and people are like, fuck super flex. Like, I don't want to start Aiden O'Connell and, whoever. So I think this year kind of may have put a little bit of a ding in that as the future. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are there. What about you, Luke?
I mean, so Superflex doesn't it's so I'm in one of my dynasty leagues is like every passing attempt you get like 0.2 points or something like that, right? Like it's the statistics are so inflated, and I'm the asshole that's like, hey, here's $150. Yeah, I'll orphan this league, no problem, right? Like I don't look into the stats or anything like that. I'm like, I'll figure it out as I go. So with a 6-point passing touchdown, and then you get a bonus for any pass that's over like 25 yards and over 40 yards and stuff like that. The quarterback stats are so inflated that it's like you cannot compete in this league if you don't have 2 elite quarterbacks. Like you are fucked.
It's basically a 2 QB league.
Exactly. Whereas if I'm in a super flex league that's 4-point passing touchdown, none of the extra stuff, right? Like you get the standard, it's 25 yards for 1 point, but it's on a decimal system. Like then it's cool because then it's like, hey, if I decide to take CeeDee Lamb with my first pick, that's going to compete with the quarterback, right, in a full PPR or something like that. Or I actually just did a dynasty draft where I traded from 3 to 12 because I'm a big fan of the bookend picks and like just having 13 guys in the queue and knowing like, hey, I'm going to get 2 of these 13 guys. If I have to trade up, I can. So I actually was able to get Trevor Lawrence and Sam Laporta. It was a team tight end premium league in the turnaround, right? And then coming back, I had in like the 5th round, I got Jared Goff. So I'm like, okay, like I can compete now with Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence, like because it's a 4-point passing touchdown league. If it's one of those, like I said, one of those inflated stat ones, you have no shot. You have no shot unless you have like a Josh Allen and he's playing at his highest level, right? Or like even Jalen Hurts last year, he had a pretty good year, but by his standard from where he was from his ADP, like he was kind of killing teams. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't as good as he was. Well, the tush push helps, right?
15 rushing touchdowns.
Well, what I thought was interesting with him is like, if you would have thought just football alone, that team fell so hard. And he kind of stuck around that 20 to 23 point range just because of the tush push. Like, because he was getting those rushing touchdowns, right?
It pains me to say it as a fellow Calabrese, but I just think Nick Sirianni is the biggest fucking fraud on the planet, and I think that's why.
I love that clip where he's on the sideline and he's really leaning over, shouting, talking shit to the other team, and Jalen Hurts looks over and was like, "Dude, stop!
Why is your quarterback more mature than you?"
That clip blew my mind. I was like, "Okay, I'm done. This guy is just." Over the top, shouting in the tunnels at the Chiefs and whatnot. But
we came here to talk Bears. Let's get back on track. Before that, I want to say, so we don't have any IDP leagues we can put on your radar. However, we are doing a string of listener leagues this year, and we're gonna have a dynasty league startup. We're going to have a guillotine league, as you mentioned.
I'll definitely do that.
Guillotine is just, there's so much strategy there and there's so much analysis. You can really get lost in analysis with that, which is what I love, is like, seeing the averages of what players were getting auctioned off for and just kind of seeing the evolution of that throughout the season is so fun. So I'm excited to introduce these guys to guillotine. They've never done it. It is so fun, but and then we're going to try a league that I think would be my personal favorite, and it's a best ball redraft league, to where you're managing a roster of players, but you're not necessarily setting the lineups. You're just having your optimum lineup get set, which I think would be interesting because so many people beat themselves up over setting rosters, but here is just like compiling the best 20 roster team. I don't know. I think it would be fun, and we'll see how it goes. It could miserably fail, but
I'm excited for that.
I thought it could be an interesting concept. Yeah,
I make the wrong decision constantly. Like I'm always Sunday morning, Shane and I are on a live talking about who we should start, and frequently I make the wrong decision.
Yeah, or I'm sitting there evaluating the weather, the rain, the wind, and benching people because of 40-mile-an-hour winds, only to see it blow up in my face.
Yeah, I think you did that with Flacco this year. He had like 350 and 3 touchdowns, and you sat him because of the wind.
You just got to ride him, dude. You just got to ride him. That guy's got a fucking cannon. So,
we'll keep you posted on that.
What's up?
We'll keep you posted on the guillotine league for sure, and we'll get you involved in whatever whatever you want to be involved in. So
cool. If you don't mind me asking, and I'm a big fan of best ball as well. That dynasty I joined actually is a best ball league as well. It's a best ball dynasty because I'm at the point where like how many leagues are you guys in? I have 4 leagues, 2 dynasty and my 2 home leagues that I that are redraft every year. Where it's like, okay, I set 4 different lineups, but I feel like I got to the point where I was up to like 10 at a point, and I was like, I have to scale back because now all my teams are playing each other, and I need this guy to just get a touchdown, and you know what I mean? Like, it's for me to try to. So I'm trying to win all 4 matchups, right, or all 6 matchups, whatever it is. So now I'm totally open to best ball and guillotine type leagues because, if I'm not mistaken, guillotine is pretty much set up like best ball, or at least the league I was in was a best ball guillotine league. So how many do you guys manage, like in terms of setting your lineup? Are you in that like 10, 20? I know guys that are doing like 30. I just don't know how they can do it.
Calls, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah, so I've been I'm pretty good at managing my leagues and shrinking that number down. I think after this year I think last year I was in like 11, but I typically co-manage teams, so there's another set of eyes. And we're going to encourage co-management in all of our listener leagues because, especially Dynasty, I just think the more eyes, the more engagement, and we want that league to be really fun, and like we want engaged owners that are going to be pushing transactions and truly taking on a GM role. So I think that's how I like to kind of manage my leagues in general, but I'm going to get that number under probably 7 for sure. And then do a survivor. I do the super contest. So I'm going to be in the Circa super contest this year, and I'll also be in like Circa Survivor. So that'll be fun. But there's so many different avenues that I like to put my attention in that, I don't want more than one standard redraft. I want to try this best ball redraft, dynasty, guillotine, just kind of be involved across the board and not get so hung up on setting 15 rosters every morning. But Truck, go ahead. What do you
Yeah,
got?
I was in 7 leagues this year, but just like Mike and I co-manage quite a few teams, so it makes it a lot easier. But I feel like the sweet spot for me is right around 5 or 6. And the way that we did it this past year is we kept the kind of same draft strategy for every draft. So we ended up with most of the same players on all of our teams, which ended up working out in our favor. But it was nice for me because now I don't have conflicting interests in my fantasy matchup. So I kind of had a strategy going into drafts. I stuck with my strategy and I had the key guys I wanted to have and they ended up producing for me. So that's how it worked out for me. But yeah, right around 5 or 6, anything more than that, it becomes a chore. Like you're the Thursday, Tuesday, the waiver, the trade offers.
Yeah.
When I'm in 7 leagues and then I get hit with trade offers, I'm just like, I don't even want to. Do I really want to dive into all that? That's kind of where I'm at. But Shane, what about you?
Yeah,
Shane, why don't you tell us how the aged veterans do it?
So
and your kid too. You got a kid who's diving into fantasy as well. So
yeah, so I was in 5 last year. That's where I kind of try to stick it around. I feel like there's this weird flex people have in fantasy that's like, oh, I'm in 20 leagues, I don't ever want to get to that spot, for the reasons you guys have all talked about. But I've been like some very serious, those 5, like 3 of them are serious. So one has been a league that we've had for 33 years. One's been a league for 20
They used to rely
years.
on the postal service, Luke.
I know a couple veterans like that.
They used to rely on the postal
And
service.
like calling in before noon to set your lineup when you find out injuries on
We literally had like Wednesday night waiver night where we had to call the commissioner and say, and whoever called in first got the guy first. Whoever happened to get in first was he would get in. So that's the league we had. I will say this. One of those leagues 2 years ago, we adopted 4 IDP players to our rosters, and I voted against it. I did not want to do it. It's been the best move that we've had in that league for quite a long time. Just from a consumer standpoint, it gives you something else to watch and root for on that side of the ball. You're not just sitting there waiting for, okay, well, I've got this offensive player. I've got to wait till they get back on offense. You have something to watch and to root for. I find myself sitting there rooting and watching for tackles and sacks and interceptions.
Yeah, that's dope. I'm telling, dude, no one does them. No one does them. I've been offered like vampire leagues and shit, which I'm trying to wrap my head around it fully and things like that. But I've been asking, like, I'm in there's another league. I won't plug them, because this is your show, but they do quite a bit of fantasy drafts and stuff like that. And they're always like, hey, we have this draft going on. I'm like, just tell me when there's an IDP league, please. I just want a full defensive roster that I can watch. So no, I'm glad the veteran supports it.
Yeah. The savvy vet.
I'm not opposed to it. Adding a few IDP players like he did, that's something that I would consider. But a full roster is tough, man.
Yeah, I support the abolishment of kickers and team defenses. A lot of leagues are doing that, I feel like. So I do like that a lot. One thing I will say, and I don't know if you guys have any formats like this, but one of my leagues has a head coach and it's plus or minus 5. And it's, you draft them. You're only able to roster one at a time. So like you can choose to take the minus 5 the week they're on a bye or whatever. But getting a team like San Fran or even like Dallas this year, right? Philly, those teams that have like 12, 13 wins, it's huge because if you're ever in a close matchup and their head coach loses and yours wins, it's essentially like a 20-point swing. So I do like the head coach a lot. That's my one home league that we added that. I mean, it's all gamblers too. So, it's just a nice little wrinkle that I enjoy.
That's fun. Before we wrap up fantasy talk, this you can tell that you're one of the guests that we could just talk to all fucking day, and we'll be here for 2 hours.
Honestly, forgot what we were talking about.
Yeah,
for the episode.
I do love drafting. So like this next year, I'm going to max out Best Ball Mania, the Underdog Best Ball Mania, drafts. Like I'm confident I can go in a draft room against any 12 guys and more times than not be one of the top 2 finishes. So that worked out this year. Truck and I did probably 40 and we covered our nut and some. We're plus money. We're plus money in 40 draft lobbies. So that was kind of like our first test. And yeah, I intend on maxing out 150 this next year and putting a lot more of my time there. Love drafting. It's kind of one of my favorite parts of fantasy, to be honest, is just navigating through a draft room and, the strategy on the fly. It's just so fun to me. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and Lucas, we'll probably invite you to some of our in August, I think, right around there. We do 2-a-days, and we do best ball drafts, mock drafts, 2 episodes a day. We're on talking nothing but drafts, so we kind of dive headfirst into it. And if you're down to join, we'd love to have you.
Well, yeah, now especially after Mike just said that he's fucking King Dick. I definitely need to get into a draft. I want to see how he drafts. You know what I mean? Like I got to see how he does.
Yeah, definitely. So
I pretty much black out during those episodes when we're doing the underdog drafts. I'll just like my brain just goes and is like as per pick. If like, we're looking up stacks or something, it just constantly goes. And I will step away after the draft and just be like, what the hell just happened?
Mike needs to change his name to the Fantasy Rain Man.
Just sees nothing but code, like nothing else.
It's not that. It's not that. I promise you, it's not that smart. But anyways, let's get into Bears. Truck, set the stage for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Chicago Bears are in a really good spot this year. It started out really slow in this last year. 0-4, and then the last 13 games they went 7-6. And or 7-6. So, I think gearing up for this number 1 overall pick, the talk is it makes sense that everyone's talking about it because this is a turning point that the organization can make to really start to make strides and be a playoff team. So something we haven't seen in a long time, but they do have the number 1 overall pick and the number 9 in the draft. And, before we really dive into it, Lucas, I just want to get your opinion on Matt Eberflus. I know the big topic early on was he going to get fired when we fired I can't think of his name right now. I have Shane Waldron all on my mind right now. But Luke Getsy, yeah. When we fired Luke Getsy, I wanted them to fire Eberflus, especially with all the coaches that are available in the cycle now, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and of course Bill Belichick. But what is your stance on Eberflus, and how hot is that seat in your opinion?
I think he's got 2 years, unless like I think realistically, if they don't pull off those wins at the end of the year, he probably goes. Personally, I wanted a clean sweep. I wanted it pulls on down. I just feel like with where they're at and the position that they're in, it's an extremely, extremely attractive job for whoever you would be able to get the best GM candidate. And not that I guess my Twitter is a lot different than what I am in the group chat because I haven't been high on polls, right? Like the inability to retain Roquan Smith, and you traded the second rounder you got, or your own second rounder, for Chase Claypool and ended up losing value on what could become a Hall of Fame player, now a 2-time first team All-Pro. Like, for you to then go and pay Tremaine Edmonds more guaranteed money per year. I know the contract is a little bit different, and the appearance is, oh yeah, you got 2 players in TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds for a little bit more, 24 million or whatever it is, 22 million cap hit instead of the 20 million that Roquan's getting. But I think Roquan's just a different level player. I hated the fact that you had a young quarterback with potential, and opposed to building around him in your first year, you used all of your assets to rip down a 3-4 that was more than formidable and put in a 4-man front for Matt Eberflus. So there was a couple, I would have been totally comfortable with them with a clean sweep. I knew with how they were rolling on the finish that they were going to keep Eberflus, as much as I didn't want him. Like, my first impression was like, just so Bears, you know what I mean? Like the finalists were what? Dan Quinn, Matt Eberflus, Caldwell, which at the time I'm like, he's the most appealing option, right? Like
Yeah.
he's going to develop a quarterback. So I was totally okay if we were going to go with like an old school vet, go get the old school vet that like knows how to build an offense and develop a quarterback. So that was my thought. I mean, fuck, dude. Before Dan Campbell, Caldwell was the best coach that Detroit has had in a very long time. He took it to the playoffs twice. So I was that was my thought. My first impression of him was like, this guy looks like a fucking MIT professor, or like that does physics. So I wasn't high on that. Yeah. I will say he's grown on me a little bit in terms of his ability to develop young players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You know, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, if he can fucking stay healthy, like those guys are very good players, and they started off slow and they got better and better. So, and the defense got a lot better when he took over. But also then you're like questionable staff hires. Now, I will say I was pleasantly surprised. I thought we were going to end up with Shane's guy, fucking Jason Garrett, as like our offensive. I thought we were going to get that level of offensive coordinator because it's like on the hot seat. Like we're not. So for the circumstances, Shane Waldron, in my opinion, was one of the best hires you could have made. But still, if we were to fire Matt Eberflus, that wouldn't be on my top 10 of guys I would have wanted to hire as a head coach, right? So you kind of think of it from that perspective.
I'll say that. After seeing in early January, I was big on Waldron.
You were talking about him a lot.
So I don't necessarily consider myself a Bears fan. I'm not I'm not blindly loyal to like really many teams in sports just because I love sports as a whole and I like good organizations that are good for the sport. So Bears have always been frustrating for me. I would say I'm blindly loyal to the Blackhawks, growing up with season tickets, and then the Cubs for a while because I was just an idiot and wanted a World Series so bad. But the Bears have always been extremely frustrating, as you mentioned, for me. So Eberflus, yes, gained confidence over the end of the season. Waldron, that's exactly who I wanted during the hiring process. However, now that Vrabel and Coach B don't have jobs, I don't know if those two could even coach together or how that dynamic would be. But I think I would right now say, bring me Vrabel, a guy that will come in and develop a culture and a winning culture in a city that values defense and hard-nosed fucking football. Give me him as the head coach, and then give me Coach B to develop a young quarterback. Whether that's Fields or Caleb, that's a conversation for later. But we've seen what he's done with Mahomes, even with Sam Howell. I mean, Coach B is, in my mind, probably the best offensive mind next. I mean, you can put him in the conversation with McVay, Shanahan, all those guys, but Coach B's outstanding. So I don't know. I'm pretty impartial with where we're at. I think it's good. I think there's better out there.
I just couldn't believe Washington hired Quinn.
What
label? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've seen that.
That made no
story.
sense.
You inherited,
and then bring in Cliff Kingsbury because you think that you're going to trade up God knows what for Caleb.
I'm fully aligned with that thinking, to be honest. Now, for me, I played football from Pop Warner all the way through high school. So I've always been a football guy, and my grandpa was a big Cubs guy, so I used to watch the game. When I moved from Westchester to Glen Ellen, I lived like 3 doors down from my grandpa. So in the summers, especially that first summer when you don't have any friends, and I moved at the beginning of the summer, not right before school. So it was like I hung out with my grandparents all the time, and like we'd watch every game together. So my fandom kind of died though with that Aramis Ramirez, Sammy Sosa, that core. And then it's a shame that I wasn't paying attention as much. Now, don't get me wrong. I was happy they won the World Series when they did, but I wasn't super invested the way I was before. I've always been extremely invested in the Chicago Bears, which is probably why my disposition is so, not great when it comes to being a sports fan. Because I'm just a Chicago guy, and I inherited all shitty teams. The only team that I truly picked on my own is Houston Cougars for basketball, college basketball, because I didn't really pay attention to college basketball until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and really like the way that I just like anytime you're volleyball spiking balls off the backboard and shit like that. I'm a big fan of it. So I just like their brand of basketball, just a lot of glass cleaning and defense and stuff like that. So Unfortunately, I'm extremely invested in the Bears to a fault, to a point where it's probably shortening my life.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that for sure. Well, looking at Ryan Poles and analyzing all the moves he's made so far, I think I could call out of the 8 moves that I've been able to identify, I've called 2 of them a success. So, I'm not happy with Poles. The only 2 that I would call a success, the Carolina trade last year, so to give us the number 1 pick,
It's great.
and bringing in Montez Sweat. I mean, yeah, we're giving him a lot of money, but everybody saw what Montez Sweat did for our defense towards the end of the year. I think it was a mistake hiring Eberflus. I don't think he's the guy long term. Trading Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith, and the absolute disaster of trading a second rounder for Claypool, just terrible. And then you're passing up Jalen Carter to draft Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright was a great tackle for us, but we saw what Jalen Carter was this year and what his potential is in the NFL. So overall, I'm not particularly thrilled with Ryan Poles so far. So I agree with you. I wish they would have gotten rid of him along with Eberflus and Luke Getsy. Absolutely cleaned house this year.
And unfortunately, the McCaskies and their unwillingness to rid themselves of guaranteed contracts for coaches and GMs. So it was like the nightmare was playing out. And don't get me wrong, I don't want the Bears to lose, especially develop that losing culture with a young core, right? Like there is part of that. Hey, you got to break out of being a loser and being okay with losing. And the one thing I'll give Ryan Poles a lot of credit for is his drafting, especially in the early rounds. Because what we saw with Ryan Pace, it was like the complete opposite. Ryan Pace in the early, especially the first round, wasn't great. Not that he had a ton of shots at it because of the Khalil Mack trade, but he was really good at picking up those 4th, 5th round guys that came in and contributed and being pretty solid starters like the Adrian Amoses and even undrafted free agents. Whereas I think Ryan Poles has been pretty impressive in the first couple of rounds. 3rd round, we'll look past that. But the first 2 rounds, I think he's been pretty good. And Braxton Jones is a good pickup later, right? There's a couple guys like that. Roshan Johnson I kind of like, but I still think we need a huge upgrade at running back. But I'm pretty aligned with a lot of what you're saying. Even the Montez Sweat trade, I'm and this is the way I explained it to my friends that I speak with about it, on group chats and stuff like that. I'm not going to be upset that they got a good player, but I feel like he kind of backed himself into a corner and fucked himself a little bit, because now you're paying Montez Sweat like he's been all pro level pass rusher for his whole career, when really it was that season last year. And we'll be able to see how that move really works and how it plays out over the next few years. Cause I believe this was his first year in double-digit sacks. So if he goes back to 6 sacks next year, then we're like, what the fuck? And don't get me wrong, he's a very solid edge player. He's not someone that's driven by his sacks. And I think sacks are kind of an overrated number. I truly think just pressures is more important. And if you're consistently getting pressure, you're going to get more sacks. But he's extremely sound against the run, and you do need that contained player to be your defensive end in a 4-3, especially in Matt Eberflus's type of defense. So, like I said, I wasn't going to complain about it, but there are things you can pick apart about the Montez Sweat deal in general. Khalil Mack, I'll disagree with you a little bit on that. I felt like it was kind of a necessary move, as much as I didn't want it to happen. His cap number, because he was restructured so many times, was insane. So I get why they kind of bit the bullet in that year 1. But I also think if you wait towards the end of towards the trade deadline and eat a little bit more of that cap, you're going to get a lot more for him than a second rounder, right? I don't, and it turned out where you're getting, now you make a selection there. It's Jaquan Brisker for Khalil Mack. You're trading an older veteran player, but he had 17 or 18 sacks this year, right? He was pretty fucking productive, and he stays healthy. The only reason why we IR'd him that year before was because we knew Nagy was on his way out. We knew it was kind of fucked, and it was all right, he stays relatively healthy and he plays through everything. So I get why the move happened. Not that I necessarily, it's never good to trade a guy that's going to go to the Hall of Fame. That's never an ideal thing, especially when he's got some years left in the tank, but I understood it a little bit more. I just think you could have gotten more value for him. Whereas, the things that bother me are the younger guys, like the Roquan Smith, that you couldn't get an extension done, and you gave him what was reported by Ian Rappaport. It was a highly backloaded deal that had escalators in the contract that no person over $15 million, like, so no contract over $15 million had these types of escalators, and it would have hurt the linebacker market in general, right? Like that to me. So like the drafting part of things, I'll give Ryan Poles a lot of credit for. I like his drafts, and I don't even mind, like, when Jalen Carter was sitting there, it's like, okay, you could have perfected the plan and got Jalen Carter there at 9, and then trading away what was the best player in the draft and only getting a 4th rounder for him. Like if you get a 3rd and then draft Darnell Wright, Darnell Wright was the highest tackle on my board. So the only thing that could have gotten him to recover from that, it was like, if you watch my podcast episode, we usually do a draft episode, welcome to jump on, where we just kind of sit there and BS for the whole draft. But like, it went from like, how did he pass this up and he only got a 4th rounder, to like, okay, well, he selected my draft crush at tackle, so I can live with it, right? And I think Darnell is going to be a very good cornerstone for a while. So when it comes to the draft itself, I do like it. But now it's like, why is Jalen Johnson still not fucking extended?
That's crazy. That is the top of my list of things that need to be done for the Bears to have a successful offseason.
He went out and said straight up, like, I know, like, my production in terms of ball production isn't as high as some of these other guys to warrant like a market resetting deal. It's just like, it's the idea of, hey, we're trading for Montez Sweat, so the defensive, like, the reason why the defensive backs, you have a lot invested in there, and you have very good players in the defensive backfield, but the pass rush has to work with that, and you had no pass rush. So you go and trade for a pass rusher. What do you expect to happen? Like, his ball production is going to go up. It's going to rush quarterbacks to throw more, to make worse throws, to throw the ball in worse spots. You know what I mean? So it's like, you fucked yourself over. Like, you probably could have gotten him for the $18 to $19 million range. Now it's like a $23 million extension. So what are you going to do? Franchise tag him? Like, just fucking get the deal done. You made that money with cutting Eddie Jackson and
white hair.
So just get the fucking deal done. I expected it to be announced like an hour after they made those cuts. It's like, okay, now you have your Jalen Johnson money. So the negotiating of contracts, and I don't know if it's a Pace guys, because he did get the Cole Kmet extension done, which I support, and I really think he was an underrated player and underutilized in the Nagy era. And we're starting to see him kind of emerge as one of the top tight ends. But like, I don't know. It's like part of me is in support of, hey, like, we need someone a little bit more conservative with the cap, because Pace was just throwing around money. But I really like Pace a lot, and I thought he built the best program through his 4-year rebuild. And really what fucked him up was doubling down on Nagy and tripling down on Nagy, where it's like, okay, well, now instead of getting building blocks, we need to pay for Andy Dalton and Nick Foles and all these bullshit guys that are taking up $10-12 million cap hits, instead of just like building around Trubisky, which he had his flaws, but like, I thought like Nagy kind of gave up on him very quickly. So, I like, there's more than one part. It's not just drafting for a GM. There's the extension, there's the negotiations, there's the free agent deals and things like that. And I just feel like he's come up short in a lot of those other areas where I do think he's a very solid drafter.
So I'm really not going to expand on any points. I want to keep moving here. I'd like to say, since we've talked Eberflus and we've been on the defense, like, what defensive moves this offseason do you need done, whether that's through the draft or free agency, to have that defense in a place where you're confident going into the next season?
I mean, I think we've invested enough in defense, to be honest, right? Like, if you were to get, the only guy I would say hand over a blank check to is Chris Jones, if for some reason Kansas City lets him out, because that's your 3 technique. You have a few young defensive tackles there, right? This defensive draft isn't that great. So like, I don't necessarily, I think Jared Verse actually would be a pretty good compliment to Montez Sweat, being like that, hey, you have your power and speed, or your thunder and lightning. But, I don't think, go ahead.
Are you out on my LSU boy, Danielle Hunter?
Well, I wouldn't hate that, but I think Bryce Huff's going to be a little bit cheaper. And like I said, like, I just feel like we've already invested so much on defense that it's like, dude, like, let's fucking modernize the Chicago Bears and like put some money on offense and I'd rather go pay like a top of the market free agent center, possibly the Tevin Jenkins things is tough, but yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, like I really like Bryce Huff, but you're kind of there, right? Like you have a ton of money in the linebacker room. You have a bunch of young, very good talent. I think the top priority is extending Jalen Johnson and then getting another complimentary edge piece. So, is it Danielle or Daniil?
It's Daniil.
Daniil? Okay, yeah.
It was always Danielle at LSU.
It was always Danielle at LSU.
Sometimes those guys go through rebrands.
So that's fine. If it's Danielle, then I'm going to go with the LSU guy. I'm going to go with the Origins. But when it comes, I wouldn't. That's not a move I'd be mad at. But like, I just think go get a couple guys later in the draft that have some potential. Like you've already invested a ton on every level of the defense. So Bryce Huff, Hunter, and he's been rumored to the Bears. I wouldn't be mad at that move, but it's like he's probably going to demand like 17, 18 million a year, right? Like you really need to spend more money on defense. Like go fucking figure it out on offense.
All right, well, let's talk offense. Number one draft picks been the conversation. Do you trade out, create more assets around Justin Fields, or do you look to move him and take Caleb and kind of restructure your offense that way?
Yeah. So I would be a lot more open to you selecting a quarterback, whatever quarterback people land on. I know Caleb Williams is the runaway favorite for the number one overall pick. I think his number on DraftKings right now is like minus 1,500 or something, which is a huge favorite, right? Personally, I've seen some chinks in the armor. I wouldn't, again, if we cleaned house, I'd be a lot more open to it and like hired a Ben Johnson or a Slowick or someone like that, right? A young offensive mind that has some play calling experience. I'd be a lot more open to drafting a quarterback at one, but it's like, we're right there on the brink where if you trade this pick and even only go down one or two spots, like I personally believe Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best best player in this draft by a wide margin. I think he's a can't miss wide receiver prospect. I mean, we saw him carry, like he came in as a sophomore and carried that offense. CJ Stroud's an incredible player and had an incredible rookie season, right? But like you look at last year with McCord and it's like, you knew the ball was going to Marv every third down. You knew like he came through so many times that team, opposed to years prior, did not have the offensive firepower that it had in years past. So I feel like Marv is, I remember watching him last year, even in that last game of his true freshman year season. And I'm like, dude, this is like the best wide receiver I have seen in college in a very long time. Like he's just a different level. He has everything you want in terms of the tools, the footwork. I know your boy Malik Neighbors is a very good prospect as well, but I think he's a little bit more limited in terms of route tree. And, he's explosive as shit after the catch. Like he is a very, very special athlete. And I think he has a lot more to offer than some of the other explosive athletes like a Sammy Watkins or those busts, right? Like that. I don't want to put him in that category because I do think it's a very stacked wide receiver class, but I would probably have him as third on the board. I like Rome Odunze as well. And especially with like a DJ Moore, right? Like DJ Moore is similar to Malik Neighbors and what they're able to do, but he's way more polished. And it's like, you already have a Malik Neighbors at home, and it's not the negative version of that meme. Like we have one already. Like I think a good compliment to DJ Moore would be a Marvin Harrison. So especially if you're able to work something out where Washington wants Caleb and you're able to get an extra first and a couple mid-round picks, something like that, to move down one spot. That would be a huge haul. And then moving down again to the Patriots, so you're staying in range for Marvin Harrison. I'd be really. That's the way I would go if I was Ryan Poles personally, right? I'm just not. I feel like the days of the Andrew Lucks, John Elways, Peyton Mannings, those like elite quarterback prospects are over, and that's just because of the way that college football is played now, especially offensively. I don't think Caleb Williams has taken one snap under center. He's going to be a project, and I'm not saying he can't be an incredible player at the next level. Like his arm talent is fucking absurd. But like when it comes to playing within the structure of the offense and all that, you saw his Heisman year, he was fantastic, but what was around him was way better. And then last year it was like, okay, we're starting to see some chinks in the armor. Like he's not this in my opinion, he's not God's gift to quarterbacks prospects, right? He's going to come in. He's listed at 6'1". So in my opinion, he's going to come in at 6 foot or shorter. My guess is he's going to measure up at 5'11" and 3/4. I know quite a few people that are around the USC program that have stood face to face with him, and they're like, he's not that big of a guy. He is, and to be fair, I'm a little bit of a heightist, and that's coming from someone who's 5'9" and Italian and short and stocky, right? Like, but like, I'm not an NFL player. So like, I'm a little bit of a, hey, I want my quarterback to be 6'2", 6'3". Like 6'2" is the shortest I want you to be at quarterback, right? Like, I want you to be that or taller. That 6'4", 6'5" range is what you're still looking for. So that's just my thoughts on him. And then you have some of the other stuff that people are saying, like he might not be the best leader, and I don't necessarily care about the nail painting and crying and shit like that. That doesn't bother me as much as like how dejected he looks on the sidelines, and like, you know, him and post game pressers and stuff like that. Just the body language that he shows is like, is he that guy? Like, Justin Fields got dealt the shittiest hand really you can ask for as a quarterback. And if it's like, are we going to really move from one quarterback that excels outside of structure to another quarterback that excels outside of structure? I don't know. I would prefer someone more in the mold of like, yeah, he just hits his reads on time. You know what I mean? Like, personally, my favorite quarterback in this draft, and I know you guys might clown me, I think the best, the one that's going to translate the most is JJ McCarthy, but I would not take him at 1. Right? Like, in, you know, Illinois' finest, Nazareth Academy's finest. I hate to rub that in. But I just feel like he ran a pro-style offense. He's taken a ton of snaps under center. He's a humble enough kid where, like, hey, if we're going to run the ball fucking 35 times and you're only going to throw it 12 times, like, that's the game plan. But every time they've asked him to throw in order to, you know, like that TCU game, when they needed him to sling the rock all over the ground or all over the yard, and you know, to go into overtime in that first playoff game, it was like, hey, we need you to start throwing the rock. Like, I feel like he's only asked to throw when they really need him to throw badly. You know, he wasn't like, hey, we're going to throw on first down to get ahead of the sticks and run that type of offense. And I feel like it was high pressure situations that he was able to excel in. So and he just throws with great anticipation and within the structure of the offense, which I think the league is starting to trend more towards that. After you seeing like a Brock Purdy kind of come in and do really well, like, sometimes it's better to just like, Patrick Mahomes is 1 of 1. And I know that's the comp that you're getting for Caleb Williams, but I feel like Caleb Williams' better comp would be like a Josh Allen, to be honest, a much rawer prospect than we anticipated. That's going to take some bumps and bruises. And it's like, this team is heading in a certain direction. Now, are you going to really want to pull them back to develop this rookie? I do think Waldron would be a good pairing with him or Fields, but, you know, Waldron was able to revive Geno Smith. Like, I would imagine he could do something similar with Justin Fields. Justin Fields was a very, very good prospect as well coming into it. It really was kind of one of those weird things where he was number 2 on the board up until like 3 weeks before draft time. And then it's like, Zach Wilson lit it up at BYU and he made a sick throw on his pro day. And, you know, like, though Trey Lance, he's kind of that mold of tall dude that, you know, could fit the Josh Allen mold. But yeah, I think Caleb's better comp would be Josh Allen. And like, he doesn't avoid contact. Like, he is too small. It's one thing if you're playing in the Pac-12 to be lowering your shoulder on contact all the time. Like, you got to break those habits, and you need a PR makeover if you're going to get drafted at number 1 overall. Like, because he's just way too small to be like trying to fucking truck NFL defenders. You see a lot of his highlights are incredible, right? Like, I'm not going to take anything away from him as a prospect, but I just don't think he's this can't miss, has to be number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. So few things. So I just looked up Justin Fields. It says he's 6'3", 228. I've stood next to him a couple of times. I'm 6'3.5", and I thought he was short. So I don't know where that 6'3" is coming from.
I think he's 6'2", but yeah.
I don't know. I could have been wrong, but I don't know. That seemed crazy. Obviously at the combine, he would have had to measure in. So I'm guessing I was just wrong. I think I saw him at like Randolph Street Fest a few times when I was living in the West Loop.
Oh, okay.
And I was surprised at his size. But I Googled that and I was like, wait, there's no way. I completely got that wrong or
Were you standing
whatever.
on a curb and he was on the street or something?
That might have been. I thought it was the opposite, to be honest. I thought I was on the street and he was on a curb. Regardless, that surprised me. So I have been pretty vocal about Caleb Williams. I'm on the side of thinking that he's a generational prospect. That being said, so is Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think the Bears stand in a really unique and outstanding situation where you have Fields. Either way they go, I think is a win. So like, I think you can go the way that the NFL currently stands, and you mentioned it a little bit, is you either need to have that generational type quarterback, that Mahomes, that what looks like CJ Stroud, these guys that are like, regardless of what's around them, they're going to be in the playoff mix, deep in the playoff mix year after year. So you either have to go that route or the Brock Purdy route of where you have a quarterback that you can put all of these playmakers and assets around him and kind of just not ask him to do too much, but play within a system and succeed at a high level. So the Bears are in a situation where they can move forward in either direction. I don't know how much you're going to have to pay Fields. That might come to be an issue, but the Bears, regardless, the Bears sit in those two different spots, and it's like, which way do we want to go? Do you want to gamble that Caleb Williams is that guy? It sounds like you do not want to do that. It is a gamble, right? Because like you're saying, you're resetting an entire offense and betting on this one guy to be that guy. I personally think his talent is. I know there's some character concerns, so I'm not going to say that's the right move until I would sit in a room and interview him and evaluate that side of things. But from a true arm talent standpoint, I think he is that special. So
his arm is absurd. I'm not going to dispute that. Like, you're just a fucking hater if you're going to dispute that fact. Like, his arm is special. He's got a special arm.
So what is it? So I think what matters is, and if you're Poles and you're the Bears, you need to field all of those trade offers for one. So if you can get a historic haul to move back to 2 or 3, which is where I think you can get Marvin, that starts to become interesting, right? So, I think I would have liked to see a little bit more growth from Fields as like able to slow the game down in the pocket and make the right reads and go to your second and third option and complete plays. I don't know that is that on him going through all these OCs and having just a disaster situation as a Bear, or is it a true, like, how I see the field and make reads? That's the concern with Fields, right?
Yeah, no, and see, like, it's funny because, like, I feel like I'm the opposite of most Bears fans, where Bears fans were really high on Fields coming in, whereas I wasn't. I actually had him ranked 4th on my board as well, so I thought him being the 4th rated quarterback. But I was really high on Trey Lance, so I'm not a fucking quarterback evaluator by any means, right? Like, I also think Trey Lance got fucked pretty good. Like, he started like 4 games, right? So, and even Zach Wilson is you could see he's gotten better for sure, right? And hasn't been in the best situation with the Jets. The Jets are historically bad at developing quarterbacks the same way that the Bears are. So, it's hard. I think like situation, landing spot, all of that stuff matters so much. Like, is Patrick Mahomes, if he doesn't land on the Kansas City Chiefs and has Andy Reid, one of the best, quarterback developers the game has ever seen. I mean, he was a raw prospect. A lot of people had him ranked 4th or 5th on their board, right? And like, now I feel like we're seeing the overcorrection because Patrick Mahomes was rated so low on a lot of draft boards. Now, like, he was given a 2nd round grade a lot of the time, right? So it's like now we're seeing a similar prospect in Caleb Williams getting pushed to the forefront of like generational. Listen, I wouldn't be mad if they drafted Caleb Williams, and I would understand it, but I just feel like the Chicago Bears are one move away from, like, especially now, if you're going to get a Mitchell Trubisky type package for moving down one spot, I'm not fucking moving out of that spot, right? Because like the rookie contract, is appealing. That's sexy as well. I do think you need to figure out and have some preliminary talks with Fields' agent and be like, hey, are you trying to Daniel Jones us, or can we get you on a 3-year, fully guaranteed $30 million a year contract?
Smith, yeah.
Yeah, like something that's more reasonable, so you can still keep that salary cap, because you can't pay him $50 million a year, right? Like what all these other quarterbacks are getting. And the Daniel Jones contract really fucked over the Giants, in my opinion. So,
and that conversation has to be honest in that, like, listen, these next 3 years, if we succeed and you're the franchise guy, we're in the mix of a Super Bowl, we're going to pay you that money. We need to see a little bit more, and we need to be able to invest in areas to give you a situation to succeed. Right.
And I do think like a lot of the so that's what I was getting at with Fields. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff was induced by management, because he was in between the bottoming out of one regime and then the complete teardown. Like, our first year, our major investments were Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Braxton Jones turned out to be pretty good, but you had a really shitty offensive line, to the point where I think he developed a lot of bad habits, right? And I thought it really took for him up until he came back from that injury and seeing Bajan operate the offense a little bit. Because Bajan, I mean, he's a backup. He's a backup for sure. But Bajan Orange, I do think he like operates at a high level. You could tell he took a lot of snaps in college, like just getting the ball out on time and stuff like that. So I think Fields needed some time to like start trusting the guys around him and realizing the offensive line was a little bit better. But then we saw, like, if Tevin Jenkins gets hurt, that interior was so dog shit, and interior pressure is really the biggest Achilles heel for any quarterback, especially if you want to sit in the pocket and deal. But I do think, like, I saw enough where if you're going to get a generational haul for moving down a spot or two and being able to get what I think is the best player in the draft, that's the route I would go.
Let's hear from Truck. I want to hear Truck and Shane's standpoint. I know Truck's also a diehard Bears fan, so let's hear what you got, Truck.
Yeah, I'm excited because either way they go, whatever decision they make, I think it improves our overall system. Whether they stay with Fields, draft Marvin, and get some pieces around him from that haul, I think we're in a good spot. And if we go with Caleb, financially, we're in a good spot where we'll be able to assign someone like Danielle Hunter and make our defense a truly top 5 defense. So regardless of the way we go, I think we're going to be in a good spot. But I do think they need to draft Caleb, and it all depends on their conversations they have with him, those interviews they have with him, and whether or not they think he's going to be a good leader for the team. And if you have any question whether or not he is not going to be the guy, then you have to trade the pick. And for me, I think Washington is setting up to make a serious offer. What that offer is, we'll find out. I think we might have prepared a couple of ideas to spin off at the end. But, I think Caleb Williams, his arm talent alone with Shane Waldron, the only thing I'm really worried about is Eberflus. I don't want Eberflus to be fired, and then all of a sudden Caleb Williams has another regime his second year in. So I know that's
the Bears thing you can do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so but then again, Ryan Poles and Eberflus, they inherited Fields. They didn't draft Fields. So they could easily be like, hey, let's draft our guy, take Caleb Williams. We're not only resetting our financial clock, but we're resetting our career clock and giving us some extension on that. Because I do think if Eberflus and Poles draft Caleb, regardless of how it goes next year, I think Eberflus is going to stick around for at least an additional year. So I think he extends his tenure with the Bears by a whole year by drafting Caleb and giving them more of an opportunity to grow and really develop. So
this is all speculation, but when I saw Eberflus rehired, I thought that meant Fields is staying. So, and then you hear that like in the OC interviews that Eberflus was really backing Fields and pitching Fields as their guy. So like, again, that's hearsay and speculation, but those are kind of the signs that I got from Eberflus staying. Though I do understand the point of, putting all your chips in the Caleb, putting all the chips in the Caleb's corner. Like, yeah, you are extending your career trajectory a little bit, at least like two, maybe 3 years. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Luke?
I think that's the typical GM coach move, right? Like, oh fuck, we got a rookie now, so we need a couple more years to figure it out, right? Like, I do think like there's so many factors at play, and even Kevin Warren recently said, "Hey, I fucking love Justin Fields." So in that interview with Jared Payton, I don't know if you guys saw it. I'll send it to you in the DM. But I'm just like I said, I understand either way. I also think I was really high on CJ Stroud coming out last year. And I thought if we were going to make him, like I would have, if you were to give me CJ Stroud, and this is, I know hindsight's 2020, but if I were to pick, do we draft CJ Stroud last year and pass up on the haul, or draft Caleb Williams this year and pass up on the haul? I would have taken Stroud over Williams personally.
Yeah.
He's just he's just a different style of quarterback. Like, we've seen an out of structure quarterback and how it doesn't work all the time. Like, there is a development curve for those guys. Whereas like CJ Stroud was a see it and throw it kind of guy, and his cognitive scores kind of indicate like, oh yeah, he's not the smartest, but you just need to know enough to sling that fucking rock.
Yeah, so that's always the risk. I was high on Stroud. My concern with him was like playing in the Big Ten. I'm kind of an SEC homer in that like you just don't have games against Northwestern. You don't have games against. I mean, I know Iowa defense is tough and all of that, but like,
no, the Big Ten's the most overrated conference in sports.
Yeah, it's trash. It's absolute trash. So like, there was times where Stroud like just knew they were going to win, so he was a little bit like, I don't want to say lazy with his reads, but he would make throws where I wasn't always like, is he seeing the best option? You know what I mean? Like and then stepping into the NFL, he could not have been better, right? Like the way that he sees the field is incredible. He was arguably the best rookie quarterback season we've seen that I've seen, period. Passed every single test. So, you never know what's going to happen until they step on the field, see the difference in the speed of the defense, and really, either sink or swim. So
I felt that way about Fields too, honestly. And I felt that way about Stroud up until the Georgia game. And like, after seeing that, I'm like, yeah, no, he's the fucking guy. Like, you couldn't move the ball for 2 years, and he just absolutely thrashed them. They should have won that game. I was like, and then you saw his athletic ability. So it's like, okay, he chooses to be a pocket passer, but if he needs to get outside the pocket, like that's what did it for me. I still can't believe teams watched that game and we're like, oh yeah, I'll elect for the Hobbit instead. I just could not believe that Bryce Young went one. And like, that was
New Year's Eve, right?
I believe so. I mean, it was the first playoff game.
The playoff game, yeah. So I didn't get to watch that. I was actually at Billy Keeley's wedding. You remember Sean Keeley, right?
Oh yeah,
of course. So I didn't get to watch that game. I should have went back and watched it, because that's a great point. I mean, that was all right. Here's an NFL defense. That was how many first round draft picks off that defense?
There's like 7. Dude.
Yeah, 7.
It was actually insane.
That was the number I thought. So, that's definitely the test there. Shane, I want to hear what you have. We've all said our piece. I'm interested in what you think. If you're sitting in the Bears seat, how you're looking at things and where you're going.
So a couple of things, like I didn't think keeping Eberflus was an indication of keeping Fields, because I think the Bears are a little bit like my team, the Cowboys, where they don't want to eat that cost of paying a coach not to coach there. And I think it was more about keeping Eberflus on no matter what. So I don't think that's a strong indication for keeping Fields in that instance. I kind of leaned a couple of reasons to Caleb. One, for the economic value of resetting that quarterback clock, because I do think Fields would come in to that upper 30s, maybe close to 40 mount, whether if it's 3 years, 4 years. I think it'll come around that mark. And then, I don't like a lot of what I saw from Fields. You look at his fourth quarter stats, his passer rating, completion percentage, all tanks towards the end of the games. That record,
good point.
It's a little bit concerning for me. So those two factors alone, the economic value and then how he plays at the end of the games, is kind of a concerning component for me for keeping him.
No, and I think that's the strongest argument against Fields. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like sold on Fields being the franchise guy, right? Like I'm just not sold on Caleb being the franchise guy either. I think that's where my thought process is. And it's like this move can set you up for the next 5 years if you trade out of this pick. And you know, honestly, it's a really tough position to be in for Ryan Poles because it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you have Caleb go to Washington and he has a CJ Stroud type rookie season and Fields is still struggling, you're gone. Like that's it for you, right? Whereas it's the opposite. If you draft Caleb and he struggles and Fields goes to say a Pittsburgh or Atlanta and then takes off, now you're gone too. So it's like you really do just have to go with your guns here. But I do think the fourth quarter stuff is alarming. I do think there's a little bit of context that needs to be added because a lot of the times like that Broncos game, that Detroit game, like Flus is the type of coach where if you get a lead, it's like, okay, let's pound the rock and just kind of waste clock and stuff like that. And then now the game flips on its head and it's like, now we need you to throw because we're down 3 and we need you to go get, and it's like, why don't you just stay fucking aggressive throughout the game and put up 40 instead of, hey, we're going to tone it back. And this, like, it's very clear. And I think it could be Getsy. But I think it was more Eberflus influence, right? Like his defensive mind, him being an older coach, stuff like that. So I do think it's a little bit of it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, because those stats are damning. Therefore, like, you need your quarterback to be the best in winning time.
And I will say this. I think that Washington is the team, though, that would offer a historical type deal. I think they are in a position with this new ownership they would give an insane offer to the Bears for that pick.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I have here's my vision for the rest of this episode. We've kind of talked this through a little bit. Let's talk about what that package could look like, and then that's where you start. So I haven't I'll admit I haven't gone back and looked at historical trading out of the one spot. So I want to hear if you guys, I'm sure Luke's looked at that. I want to hear if Shane or Truck's done some research there. Let's see what could be realistic and if that's enough to get us to move. And then after that, let's all form a conclusion. We can make some assumptions and say, this is our stance. And we'll make a hard stance. Does that sound?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
So Truck, do you have some trade research that you've done?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking back on the most recent one is the Carolina one from last year. Bears traded the number 1 overall. They got DJ Moore. They got the 109. They got a second rounder, a 2024 first, and a 2025 second. And I'm kind of envisioning a very similar trade. So ideally, I like one of the players that I would include in here. But if Washington gave us the 102, they gave us their second rounder, gave us a 2025 first, and Terry McLaurin, I would definitely be considering that. I really like Terry McLaurin. I think he's a really talented wide receiver. If we end up trading that pick and drafting Marvin Harrison, our 3 wide receivers, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and Marvin Harrison. I don't know what I would do at that point if that was to be the outcome, but
that's not nearly enough for me. That's because I think Caleb Williams is a generational quarterback talent. So that's not nearly enough. I would need to see a lot more than that. And I think, honestly, they're probably in a position to negotiate more than that. Like Shane mentions the new ownership. I'm talking multiple firsts for sure. Like it starts there. I would like to see a lineman. I don't know what their interior line looks like, but I would like to get a lineman instead of McLaurin and then maybe sign like Curtis Samuel, who has history and chemistry with DJ Moore. And I think he's a great wide receiver 3 option. So like Scary Terry, that would, as crazy as that 3-headed monster sounds, I just don't think it's necessary, especially you have Cole Kmet, who I think is a lot better of a pass catcher than we've seen him utilized as, but I'd like to see more than that. I don't know. That's just me. Because if you're giving up a generational quarterback talent, again, that's where like I sit with thinking Caleb is. So that's where I start negotiations. And I think you'd be stupid not to, of just, even if that's not your thought process, the market assumes that. So start negotiations there. I need to see more than that.
I mean, do you guys have any other trade scenarios? I know I'm trying to look it up right now in the advanced search. I have a tweet that I put out with the most comparable trades. I know Jared Goff would be one. Because we're talking about we moved down 9 spots to get that DJ Moore trade going on, and that involved the extra first and extra second, which I thought that second should have been a first, to be honest, in 2025. And I thought, or that instead of us getting 63, which is essentially a third round pick, I wanted that earlier second round pick that would have been like in the 30s or early 40s, something like that. So
I think the reason why that wasn't a first and it was a second is because the Panthers' stance on DJ Moore is like, this is a wide receiver one. He is a star,
on a really good contract too.
Yeah, on a great contract, which I kind of would have agreed with. So, but yeah, I don't know. I need to see multiple firsts. What about you, Shane?
So I've got a couple different ones I put together. I think Truck was right and a player in it. I just don't think he had the right player. So what I was thinking was Bears get the 102. They get a 2025 first, and then they get Jonathan Allen. And so they get that interior lineman that they get. If you're going to take the player out, I think, there's a couple things. I think they're always going to get the 102. I think they're always going to get the 2025 first. And then I think it comes down to, is it one or both of the second round picks?
Yeah, and this is the draft, honestly, like as much as I like future picks, I think this is the draft that you'd want to have 2 second round picks, and we already don't, it would be nice to get ours back. I would, and it's funny because I'm kind of aligned with you there, but I'm going to make a little bit of a shift and call it Daron Payne. If we're taking defensive linemen from them, I want Daron Payne. And I know I said like, hey, we've invested enough on defense, but to have a 3-tech like that, and already has that continuity with Sweat, they already know how to play together. You know what I mean? Like, I really like, and don't get me wrong, I like Jonathan Allen as well, but I would also kind of avoid the Scary Terry thing just because it's like, you already have quite a bit of, this is a deep wide receiver draft. Say we do miss out on wide receiver at 3 if we trade down, and at 9, you still, it's a deep class. You have like 7 or 8 guys with a first round grade on them, and then they're bound to slip into that early second portion, right? So if you do make a trade down, I think you can get one of, like, I'm pretty high on Troy Franklin Jr. I think
him and Keon Coleman, I think are
Keon Coleman. I like Johnny Wilson actually later in the draft too, right? Like this is a deep wide receiver draft.
Johnny Wilson would be a great pairing with DJ Moore.
Dude, it's not a 50-50 ball. It's an 80-20 ball or 90-10 ball. You know what I mean? Like he's just a fucking monster. So I get that. And I also think, I'm pretty aligned with Coles on this. Like, if you look historically and if you look at the draft value chart, that Jimmy Johnson chart, like the value would be typically like a pretty high second rounder just to move up that one spot, right? And if we're just getting a high second rounder, like fuck that. Like, you know what I mean? There's so much hype behind Caleb. And another thing that I think that that's going unnoticed is the offensive, it was either the head coach or the offensive coordinator from Wisconsin who there was some rumors that when Williams entered the transfer portal that he might go to Wisconsin for this guy. They also have him. Washington hired him as the quarterback's coach. So there's a lot of guys. Like I think they're getting ready to put together a generational haul. Now I don't think you're going to be able to get first in 25 and in 26 plus second rounders in a pick, right? Like I don't think that's possible. But I would set the mark at it. Definitely has to be a first rounder next year. Get the Bears pick back. And then personally, I would just take more of the picks, preferably in this draft. Just because then it's like, okay, now you have 2 first rounders and 2 second rounders next year. You can manipulate that board, move down, get more first rounders or more second. You know what I mean? So I think 1 first rounder next year would really put you in a very, very good position. But I'm trying to think like the Jared Goff trade. That's one.
Just negotiating this deal. Here's why it's different is you have so many teams that need a quarterback. Broncos need a quarterback, Seahawks, Falcons, Steelers, arguably. Raiders. So there's so many teams that need a quarterback. You're not trading back one spot in my mind. You're trading for Caleb Williams. It's like, listen, if you're not, you can't just use this 102 value as is, because we have 5 other teams calling us, and yeah, we're moving back a few more slots, but they're giving us a few more first rounders, so I think your negotiating power is just a lot more than moving back one spot, of course. And not to mention, I think if you trade out of that 101, you trade out of the 102 as well. You find out who wants Drake May or Jaden Daniels or this next quarterback. And if you're not intending on taking one of those top 3 quarterbacks, then you have the ability to move back again. Now you don't want to miss out on Marvin Jr., but if the Patriots, they want one of these other quarterbacks and you can move to the 103, now you're double trading. I don't know. I think if you're going to move out of the 101, you shop around that 102 as well.
And I do think that, yes, I'm aligned with you on that. And I do think that I wouldn't want to move past 103, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would just move back with one,
because Marvin is the guy you want.
I think Marvin is that dude. And I think that's what Washington can come back with in a negotiation. Dude, you're getting a generational player that looks like he has had a Hall of Famer teaching him how to run routes since he was old enough to fucking walk. Right.
Yeah.
So
catching passes from Peyton Manning at the age of 5.
Yeah. So and that's the thing too. He's got track speed. He's fast too. There's really no flaws in his game. He's good after the catch, but he's not great after the catch. That's the only thing I would say. And maybe he's not as strong on press coverage, but his feet are good enough to the point where I would compare it to Stephon Diggs type feet, right? Where it's hey, you could try to press him, but he might just make you look foolish. So maybe you don't want to do that. So, I'm kind of torn between that, hey, should we move all the way down to 106 or 107, right? Or 105 for the Giants? Because then if you move down to 105, I also think Joe Alt's an incredible prospect as well. And I agree. Upgrade from Braxton Jones at left tackle. While I think he's formidable, I think he would be much better served if it's hey, we're going to actually just put you on the interior and use you as our priority backup for guard and tackle if someone gets hurt, right? He's good enough, but I think you could definitely upgrade. So I think there's something to be said, because if you trade down to 105 and to your point, that's what you're competing with if you're Washington. I could trade down to 105 and get fucking a haul. I can get 2 firsts, 2 seconds, right? But I think it's going to be tough to really have a team like that pony up that much for moving one spot. But like I said, there's the new ownership factor, him being a hometown kid. Teams do stupid shit every single year. So if they want to do that to themselves, then I'm trading out of that pick instantly. But if it's hey, we'll give you this year's second and next year's second, well, go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's kind of one of those things. It's Poles has to evaluate that stuff. And I don't think Poles has been the greatest. And even if you look at the Carolina trade, if Carolina selects CJ Stroud, we're looking at that trade a lot differently. They're in a shitty division. They could sneak into the playoffs with a 9-win team. You know what I mean? Their defense was pretty solid. I know they saw some injuries and stuff, but if we're looking at pick 7 instead of pick 1, now we're looking at that trade completely differently. It's the fact that he identified the Panthers being garbage and them taking Bryce Young that really made that trade look a lot better. Because to trade all the way from 1 to 9, I know it really depends on how you value DJ Moore. But I wouldn't have put up until this year, I wouldn't have put him into that upper echelons of number 1 receivers. I wouldn't have put him in the top 10, right? Of wide receivers last year. Now this year, I got a much closer look at him. Wow, this guy's the fucking dude. You know what I mean? So it looks a lot better. But I thought that there could have been more. I was actually not. I thought it was the appropriate value, right? Versus, hey, you're trading down from 1. I would like you to destroy somebody in a trade. I'd like you to hurt them. So that's just my thought process. But I think when I was looking back, it was the Ryan Leaf trade and the Jared Goff trade that I think would have been the most comparable. So, I if I were to set a value, I would say at a minimum, you need a 2 this year, a 1 next year, and then like a 2 the following year, right? Like 2 2s and a 1 to move up 1 spot is a generational haul by all means. Like that's more than a lot of teams have given up. So, 2 2s and a 1 to move down 1 spot, I think would be something that you should jump at, right? Anything more than that, for sure. Anything less, now you're like, I don't know. Maybe we just stick and pick Caleb Williams if we take our guy, right? Extend. And I'm looking at this from a GM's perspective, not even a fan's perspective. Like now it's like, well, you do get that extension for an extra year, right? Like we have to go through these trials and tribulations with our rookie quarterback and develop him, get him comfortable, get him on the same page as all these wide receivers, et cetera, right? So I think a 1 and 2 2s is, because now you're looking at, like I said, that draft value chart, it really shows like, hey, a high 2 would be something that gets this done. Say it's a different year and it's the year where like what the Kenny Pickett year, where it's like, hey, we want to trade up to get Aiden Hutchinson or something like that. Now you're talking about, okay, we'll give you a 2 next year or a 2 this year. But it's different circumstances. The hype has been so real. I mean, this is like Caleb Williams has been number 1 on a lot of boards for 2 years straight, right? That's not very common. So for you to pass, like that hype is real, and it is, as much as I like JJ McCarthy, I wouldn't select him 1 overall. And that's one of the only things I would be worried about with fucking Harbaugh if we hired him, right? Like I was upset we didn't look at it. I'm like, Harbaugh might just take him at 1, like straight up. Like I'm pretty sure he wants him to marry one of his daughters. Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things where, it is a unique circumstance. But for me, I think the threshold would be a 1, a 2 this year, and a 2 next year would be good, or even 2 2s this year would be good, because Washington's now you'd be having the 33rd overall pick and then the 40th overall pick in a very deep draft class. And to me, then it puts you in position to go get yourself a Jackson Powers Johnson, which I love the idea of him, right? You need a center bad. It's been such a fucking, dude, we've been dealing with Sam Mustipher, Cody White, an old and aging Cody Whitehair.
We need our Olin Kreutz back.
Lucas Patrick. We need someone to set the center of that line. It's been so bad for so many years straight.
Yeah. Well, I think this conversation's been outstanding and is coming full circle right now. So I think we can let's make some assumptions too when we have our final our final conclusion here. I think I want to walk away with this with like 4 different perspectives, and if you need to make an assumption what that 102 trade looks like, make it, and let's come up with where we stand today for the Bears this offseason. Truck, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Here's what I think is actually going to happen, and I think Justin Fields gets traded to the Atlanta Falcons, and we get a 2nd rounder and I think there'll be a bidding war between Atlanta and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to offer their 2nd round pick, 51st overall, and I think Atlanta's going to outbid them, giving us a 2nd and the 4th this year. So pick 40 and 110, and we're going to give them Justin Fields. We're going to draft Caleb. And then at that 9 pick, it's really going to be best available. If one of those 3 wide receivers, really one of those 2 wide receivers being Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors is there, take them. If not, then I'm almost contemplating whether or not they should even fall back out of that 109 and grab some value there. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think they could just take the best available. And what's that guy's name? I can't pronounce his name. Afonso.
Tackle.
That tackle that a lot of people are projecting. So I'm fine either way. But the old Bears fan in me is just telling me that don't get your hopes up. You're going to trade away Fields. Fields is going to be a all-pro on whatever team he goes. Caleb is not going to get developed properly, and the Bears is going to come crumbling down like it has been.
That's so sad. Don't do that.
It's the old Bears fan in me talking, and it's just the fucking devil on my shoulder saying, hey, dude, press the brakes for a second. You're talking about the Bears organization. They've never been able to develop a quarterback, so expecting something different, that's just playing devil's advocate. So.
Truck is 100% correct. No, he is fucking right. Okay, I don't want this to any of this to come off as hopeful conversation. Like the Bears suck, and there's a reason for it. And it all starts at the top. And similar to what Shane is dealing with the Cowboys, the Bears only like hiring yes men. That's why I never thought Belichick was an actual possibility for the Cowboys, right?
Yeah.
So you're 100% correct in what you're saying. Now, I don't know if Fields goes and has an all-pro season or something like that. I don't know if it bites us that bad. But expect the worst from them. I will only expect the worst until they prove me wrong, and I'll be totally fine with being proven wrong because I'm a fan. So I'm either right or I'm happy. So I'd much rather be happy than right. But no, you're right.
Shane, give us yours.
All right, I think they stay put. I think they're not going to take the chance on passing of what Caleb could be. So they're going to take Caleb at 1. Fields gets traded for just a second. I think he goes to Pittsburgh versus Atlanta.
Wins the Super Bowl.
I think no, but I think with that culture and with what they've done with crap quarterbacks, they could be a playoff team for sure next year with Fields on there. If you saw Trey Lance got a 4 from the Cowboys, Fields can for sure get a 2, can fetch a 2 for sure. And then I think at 109, it's either – I don't think Neighbors is there at 109, so it's either Odunze or it's the best offensive tackle at 109.
All right. Well, I'll give my take and we'll end with Luke. Mine's a little bit similar to Truck and Shane's. I guess we've just been talking about this too much as a podcast. But mine hasn't changed, to be honest, since early January. Is Fields gets traded. I'd say probably a second's realistic. I would love to see him as a Falcon. I do genuinely like Justin Fields, and I want him to succeed. I think the Falcons and Steelers are both very good landing spots for him. I've talked before about I think the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is pretty much championship ready. TJ Watt's at the prime of his career. Minka Fitzpatrick. Hayward's a guy that once he feels that championship run coming, you're going to get the best football that he has left out of him. So I think the Steelers would be a great landing spot. Falcons, however, how much offensive weapons you have there, the next guy that steps in is going to be following up Desmond Ridder, who can't throw the football and is going to be in a spot to succeed. So either one of those, I'm very happy for Fields. However, I think Caleb Williams is a generational talent, and I want the Bears to take him at 1 and just not pass up on that next Mahomes, Stroud, clear top 3, top 5 quarterback for the next 10, 15 years. And I just don't know that anyone can offer a package that will knock me off my feet. So you get Caleb. I want to see Rome Odunze run a 4-3 and be that second wide receiver off the board, and somehow Neighbors falls to 9. That is a homer LSU fan in me, but that's what would make me a Bears fan. Find that center, get that one more defensive piece, and let's see some winning football. Let's see the new king of the NFC North. Let's see Bears fans stop being sad and pessimistic and be playing championship football for the next 10 years.
Yeah, Cole's early on was like, I'll be a Bears fan if they do 3 things. Bring in Shane Waldron, draft Caleb, draft Malik Neighbors. I'm all in. So I was going to send him a Bears hat and stuff. So now that we got Shane Waldron, we got one box checked. All we need to do is draft Caleb and Neighbors. So welcome aboard, Coles.
So do have a question for you, being a homer. Where would you rank Neighbors compared to Jamar Chase?
I love this conversation. I have Jamar Chase 1, Neighbors 2, Jefferson 3 in that order. And I've always said that.
But how much of a difference? Like how much higher are you ranking? I think Neighbors is better than Justin Jefferson as a prospect, but okay.
Just that's when it's all said and done I think as a prospect, but I also think as an NFL career, when it's all said and done, I think Chase has the best career out of the 3. I think Neighbors, obviously landing spot does matter, but I think he is that good. I think he's a better football player than Justin Jefferson. That's a pretty bold statement, but
Yeah,
like from what I've seen in college, he was a better LSU Tiger.
And I think prospect wise, it's a different conversation than NFL production, right? Like,
yeah,
Justin,
and we just don't know yet.
Justin Jefferson got force fed. You know, I also think there is something to be said about Justin Jefferson being second fiddle to Jamar Chase and him not being featured as much because, you know, that's why I think he went later. But I always find it interesting, and I know there's another wide receiver, like their wide receiver too. I'm blanking on his name.
Brian Thomas. Yeah,
he's supposed to be a first round guy this year too, right?
Yep. Yeah, he'll be drafted in the first round for sure.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm not as I like I said, I don't want to come off like I think Malik Neighbors isn't an elite wide receiver prospect, because he is. I just think he's a little bit more limited in terms of route tree, some of those things. And it could be because of Jaden Daniels. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I promise you he is, man. He's the kind of receiver that like can be used as a possession receiver, but also make the big play. Like you mentioned his big play ability. Like, you know, he's the guy that you can have, like you said with Marv, the third down, sure-handed, run a quick slant over the middle. He's going to catch that ball and you can take big swings with him. He's an elite wide receiver.
Yeah, that's that's good to hear from someone, you know, that's really closely connected to it. Because I'm only watching a couple games a year, right? Where it's like, hey, let me get my impression.
Incredible.
Very clear, he could take the top off of a defense, right? Like he can dominate anyone deep, but it really is the possession stuff that I'm more worried about.
Incredible. He's outstanding. His hands are incredible. He catches balls in space. He catches balls in a quick space. You know what I'm trying to say there, but he is an elite wide receiver.
His acceleration is different too. That's something I would give of Marv as well. Like he gets from 0 to 60 very, very quickly. Okay, cool. So I'm going to, if I can give two perspectives here, I'll give a definitive perspective that's going to be opposite of you guys just for talking points. But also I just want to say, if they do take Caleb Williams, I believe they should trade that pick no matter who's available at 9. You need, like, the Bears don't have this influx. I get it. Like, there's 70 million cap right now, but you need to extend Jalen Johnson. If you select 1 and 9, your draft class is going to cost you about 15 million. So now you have 35 million to play with. Say you sign a Danielle Hunter, you know, then you're already talking about the way they're structuring things and the way Poles seems to operate and the way the Kansas City Chiefs operate. He's not going to exhaust cap and push all in this year, right? So, like, you're not going to get that much. You're getting Caleb Williams and whatever wide receiver prospect, unless Joe Alt's there. If Joe Alt's there at 9, which I don't think there's any chance he will be, I think he goes to Tennessee if I were to mock him up. But if he's there, then I would strongly consider taking him at 9. Otherwise, I think there's some really, really good tackle prospects and wide receiver prospects that we discussed that it's like you can move back to 15, 17, something like that. Someone will come up. People don't want to, you know, he's starting to get more hype now, but the last thing I want to see is JJ McCarthy falling into the fucking Minnesota Vikings lap and having to, you know what I mean? Like, I do think he's a very good quarterback prospect, and it might be Jaden Daniels, right? If you look historically over the draft, like, it's not very common for 4 quarterbacks to go in the top 10. I think there's a chance for it, right? But like, one of these guys is probably going to fall to 12, and I don't like the idea of the Vikings getting them. So having someone jump, like the Broncos or something like that, jump to get their quarterback, you're going to get some really good value. You know, maybe you're giving back Carolina's second in that, but you're also moving up to the first in 25, something like that. I will add a little bit of perspective. So FanDuel, and here's my reasoning on why I think they're keeping Fields. Now, don't get me wrong. The Matt Eberflus slip up in the press conference talking about continuing to grow while you build around him. I think that's, you know, it could all be smoke and mirrors and just trying to increase Fields' trade value. I also think, you know, if you can maybe give up your third and get a first rounder from someone late, like a Pittsburgh Steelers at one of these playoff teams that needs a quarterback, that changes my whole thought process. Because I am thinking about it from a team building perspective, opposed to the, hey, we need an elite quarterback perspective. Because I'm a Bears fan. I'm used to just having dog shit at quarterback. That's the status quo. So I will say though, from an odds perspective, so like I said, Caleb Williams is a minus 15,000 or 1,500 to go to be the number one overall pick, while the Bears are only minus 300 to select him. So Vegas is telling you like, hey, odds are that Caleb Williams is going to the Bears, but this is not a done fucking deal, right? And if Fields does get traded between the combine and the draft, then you're going to see that number shoot to like minus 1,400, right? Like right up there with whatever Caleb Williams' odds are to go number one overall. I also saw a pretty major shift. And I do think it's the Steelers if he goes somewhere. We saw them shift from like plus 600 to minus 115. You got to follow the money, dude. Wherever, like, Vegas does not fucking lose. They lose sometimes, and I could be completely wrong, but they typically do not lose. There's a reason why they're in business, and they have the best statisticians and odds makers. I like the idea of Bijan Robinson and Fields running like read option, like that will terrorize defenses, right? That'll open up so much for Bijan, and they'll be able to tear it up in Atlanta. But I would say it's Pittsburgh. But I took a bet. It was plus 380 when it opened on FanDuel. It's no longer available, but it was plus 380 for the field to select number one overall. And the Bears was minus 600. Those odds shifted to minus 350 and plus 235. So that shift alone tells you, this isn't a done deal. So I'm going to go ahead and say definitively that the Bears trade down to two for the Caleb Williams, and they'll get a first rounder and a second rounder next year and a second rounder this year. And then they'll also trade down to 3 or maybe 5, but I would assume they trade down to 3 for the Patriots because Drake May seems like such a Patriots quarterback. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like it's a done deal already. So for them to, you get an extra second rounder this year and a second rounder next year to trade down that one spot. I don't think you're getting nearly as much from going from 2 to 3. I think they select Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 3, and then they'll either get one of Jared Verse, Brock Bowers, or Olu at 9. And yeah, I think that's the way it goes. I think that the Bears roll with Fields for one more year. And possibly adding competition like with one of their extra second rounders they get this year, like a Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was a guy that I was very, very, very down on. And he's just gotten better and better after he left Oklahoma and went to I wouldn't take him in the first round by any means, right? But if you can get him in the third round, because typically when you see a run like that really high, that's when you'll see some of these other quarterbacks that are like, oh, he played well at the Senior Bowl, or someone like a Penix even, right? Like bring in some young competition that you can try to develop and also light a fire under Fields' ass. I'm not saying that's the solution, right? But like we saw how it worked with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw how like Will Levis came in and definitely brought a spark to that Tennessee offense. Now there's dog shit on that Tennessee offense, but I can see something like that happening as well. So that's my, and it's really odds based. And the way I've seen that the line shift, I think they trade the pick. That's just my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, and speaking of odds, to support your argument, did you see what the odds-on favorite for the team that Fields will play for next year? Right now, the odds-on favorite is the Steelers. But the second is the Bears. So Vegas is saying the Bears are more probable to hold on to Fields than it is that he gets traded anywhere else other than the Steelers. I found that pretty alarming myself when I was looking at it. I was like, all right, well, I guess there is some more merit to this whole Fields sticking around thing. But, I just wanted to put that caveat in there because I thought that was interesting.
You literally had the team president say, I would like for Ryan Poles to emulate what we did last year. I mean, that's – again, they could just be trying to increase Fields' trade value. But
that's what I was afraid of.
As much as people want to say like, oh, well, Ryan Poles gets the final decision. We saw Meat Sweat Ted fucking meddle in all of the GM's business for 20 years. We had an accountant making football decisions. So like, as much as the Bears are an extremely fucking dysfunctional organization. So I do think that there's going to be some, and you got to think about it from a business perspective too. Like on Twitter, I feel like you see a lot of the Bear, like we need Caleb Williams, but when it comes to in person. You know, you had the team chanting Fields' name and stuff like that. Like George McCaskey thinks about that stuff, branding, all that stuff. Like if the fan base really wants Fields that bad and you can get a haul for Caleb Williams, I think it's a done deal, to be honest.
And not to mention the whole locker room as well. The whole locker room is behind Fields. So when you got the fans and the locker room kind of chanting that same thing, it makes it a little bit more damning.
Sorry, I ranted. I know I was supposed to give you something definitive, but
no, it's great.
Great.
No, this has been great. Luke asked me how long I thought the podcast would be, and I said 45 minutes. Here we are coming on an hour and 45 minutes.
I was worried it was going to be like 20, 30 minutes. I was like, we'll see how this goes.
This is just proof that, like, you know, we haven't talked in over 10 years. We're both talkers, and that's what you guys saw here today. So I really appreciate you coming on. It was great. Great talking to you, great getting your perspective as a diehard Bears fan. I think we will be reaching out as some of this news unfolds, and we may do like an emergency Bears episode, and we'd love to have you on for that as well, and kind of be our voice of the Chicago Bear fan base. I know we have Truck, he's in-house, but I really want to have guys like yourself who know the team, know the fan base, grew up in it, able to be a voice for for the team. So really appreciate you coming on, and had a blast.
Yeah, I had a great time with you guys. It's awesome to, you know, I feel like I've met you before, Truck, but awesome to meet you, Shane, you know,
Likewise.
And great to catch up with you guys. I had a really good time doing this. And, you know, I'm open to coming on whenever you want me to.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Right,
we'll get you in the Guillotine League as well. And Truck, how about you sign us out?
Yeah, we appreciate everybody watching, liking, subscribing to the channel. Please let us know in the comments what you guys think the Bears are going to do with this decision. It's a massive decision, and we're interested to see what you guys think. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Lucas, thanks for joining us. And as always, everybody, buckle up.